welcome to Keeping It Together. And Rachel and I are going to have a conversation about an interesting character in the Old Testament. So my name is Dave Burke and
Rachel Broughton, yep.
And we're part of the Keeping It Together team. And what we want to do is get people thinking about mental health, Christian spirituality, bringing the two together and enabling others to find mental well-being through their Christian faith. So, Gideon, tell us who he is.
Yeah.
And when he lived and what he did.
Yeah, so we are going to go right back in the Old Testament to the book of Judges. And so this is a time period where the Israelites, this is before they have a king. So they are being ruled by various people that God kind of raises up as prophets or leaders at various times. And at the time when we meet Gideon, the Israelites have been pushed back and back and back. There's kind of this interesting passage, and it says the power of Midian was so oppressive on the Israelites that they had to prepare shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. So you get this picture of the Midianites, the oppressors, pushing Israel back and back and back into the mountains. So they've been weakened and weakened and weakened. So you get this picture of a very weak people, and then we meet this guy, Gideon.
And when you meet him, he's a kind of good illustration of the atmosphere among God's people at that time. He's threshing wheat, which is something you do in the open air with the wind and all the chaff blows away. But he's doing it in secret. He's doing it in hiding.
In a wine press, to keep it away from the Midianites, because anything that kind of came out into the open would just get immediately taken and stolen and removed from them.
So it's like living with a plague of mice.
Yeah.
Everything you can find. And of course, in a sense, it's an occupied country.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes where we've talked about this idea of living in constant fight or flight, living in that heightened stress.
Heightened state of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the picture that we get. That's the context that we get, that's what people are living in.
And you get the impression, don't you, that he's quite a timid guy. Tell us about that.
Oh, you do? Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, what you get from him is, first of all, you hear that he's hiding. So he's threshing that wheat, like you said, in that wine press. So he's hiding, which makes complete sense when you think of the context. But when the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," that's the first thing you hear about him, really, that he's a mighty warrior. Mighty warrior, yeah. And Gideon sort of says, what you get is actually quite a cynical Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why has this happened then? If God's with us, if God's with me, look around. Does it look like God's really with us? I'm hiding in a wine press. You get this sort of cynical, frustrated, maybe even angry. Sorry, you're telling me that you're with me. Yeah. Right.
We're meant to be the people of God. Look at us.
Yeah. So you sort of get this frustrated picture. And, but, this abandonment. Gideon has this real sense that God's abandoned them. Yeah. And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel." And Gideon's like, what strength? And he even goes then to say, "My clan is the weakest and I'm the least in my family." So he says, well, the strength that I have is no strength. The strength that I have is not at all. So this is where we get this picture of Gideon as quite timid, as the weak one, as the one who wants to continue to hide, really.
Yeah. And reading that just now as you've been speaking, it's not like Gideon's doing the sort of pious humility thing.
Oh, not me. No.
Very good at pretending to be humble. But he genuinely means it.
Yeah, this isn't humility. This is just fact.
Yeah, I've got nothing to offer.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to bring to the table. Mighty warrior doesn't really...
Not fitting the bill.
It's a bit aspirational, isn't it?
Yeah. You're in cloud cuckoo if you think that's who I am.
So what happens next?
Well, he sort of says, look, if this is really the real deal, I'll bring an offering and we'll do that. And so the Lord waits for him to bring this offering, and it's accepted. And then what's really interesting is after this offering, after this moment of worship and encounter with the presence of God, the Lord confronts his very real fear. If you look in verse 23, just of Judges 6 there, it says, the Lord says to him, peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die.
Mm.
And I think that's a real picture there of Gideon's fears being confronted. It's being confronted twofold because firstly, he's realized he's seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So he has this very real realization that who am I to stand in the presence of God and live? So there's that sort of holiness piece that kind of comes in that. But I think there's something deeper here. Gideon is living in a constant state of fear for his life. That's the context that we're in. So this is twofold. God's confronting and dealing with the very real fear for Gideon that he's going to lose his life. And it's with that comfort, with that reassurance that he's going to move into the next stage of what's going to happen here.
Yes. The Lord is shalom. Peace. Completeness, wholeness, well-being.
Human flourishing.
And he built an altar to leave that mark on the landscape.
Yeah. The Lord is peace, yeah.
So he's full of beans.
Yeah.
And he goes off and smashes the Midianites now.
Not quite. Right. The first thing he actually does is he goes into his father's own land and he tears down the altar to this idol Baal and he cuts down the Asherah pole. And out of it, he builds a proper altar to God.
Right.
And that is quite the statement to make. And needless to say, it caused quite the kerfuffle to the point that actually his own life was in danger. His people wanted to kill him because if you offend Baal, the god of the Midianites, then what are the Midianites going to do?
They will feel they're doing God a favour if they take your life in the most painful way possible.
Absolutely. So the people are understandably afraid. They want to deal with Gideon themselves. But Gideon has got this confidence because he's being reassured by God that his life isn't in danger, that God's going to protect him.
Yeah. So Baal is gone. Asherah, the goddess of fertility, is gone.
Yeah.
And Gideon builds an altar to Yahweh. Reminds me of a famous Englishman, an Anglo-Saxon missionary called Boniface of Devon. And he went to reach people in Frisia, Northern Europe, Holland, Germany. And one of the things he did there was to march into a village and chop down an oak that was sacred to Odin.
Oh, goodness.
And he built a chapel with
a way to put a marker on your back, hey?
So here's Gideon standing on the tree, blowing his trumpet.
Yeah, and fascinating, really. The people even rename him at this point.
Yeah.
Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal contend with him. You know, if Baal's got a problem with him, Baal can take it up with Gideon. And so then you get this amazing verse in verse 34, and it says, then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the people to follow him. And there's this sense, for me, that doesn't sound very Gideon. But it isn't very Gideon. The Spirit of the Lord has come upon him. And when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon somebody, particularly in the Old Testament, they tend to do things that are slightly outside of their personality scope that we've seen so far. And this doesn't sound like the Gideon, the timid, scared Gideon, threshing wheat in the winepress and hiding. He's now, you can see the transformation here. God has done an incredible thing in Gideon, where he is now standing with this trumpet and he's blowing it and he's summoning people. He's creating a resistance movement.
Yes. So standing on the tree stump, he blows his trumpets, which are very important in the story.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so, very, very much so.
If you like a trumpet. And people from all over Israel are coming to join him.
Yeah.
And does that courage last?
Absolutely not. No. No, Gideon very quickly thinks, oh my goodness, what have I done? And we've talked about this before, where you sort of you send the email or you put something out there and you go, oh goodness, should I have done that? I totally see that happening in Gideon's mind here.
Yes, he has this burst of spirit-inspired beef.
Yeah.
And then it goes to bed that night and you can't sleep, thinking, I've gone too far.
Should I have started this ministry?
Should I keep this going?
Yeah.
Dear me, I'm going to look a right fool when everybody turns up in the next few days of, actually, I'm not a warrior.
Yeah.
I'm not
No. And then you get this really famous section in the story, which I've sat in many sermons and sort of had talked about, where you have this woolen fleece.
Yeah.
And Gideon sort of is saying, okay, God, if you're going to do what you said you're going to do, then in the morning would the fleece be dry and the ground be soaked in dew? And then the second time, okay, this time would the fleece be soaked and the ground dry? And both times God comes through.
Yes, I've heard messages about this too, sermons about this too. And quite often, people like me and you, we preach on stuff and we take the opportunity to be quite superior.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, you shouldn't use a fleece. You should trust God and get on with it. This business.
I mean, Gideon has had this face-to-face encounter with an angel of the Lord. He's had very clear instruction from God. God's come through for him several times already in this story. Come on, Gideon. Get up to speed. Get the picture. You don't need to be doing all of this nonsense back and forth with God. And we get a bit superior about the whole thing. But if I'm honest, when I read that, I think he only had to do it twice.
Did God tell him off?
Do you know, there's no criticism of Gideon from God.
Yeah.
There's no sense of God going, come on, again. You're going to ask me again. Are you really? Are we going there again, Gideon? Are you really still not sure that I'm doing this through you? There's no sense of that. God is so patient with Gideon. And I don't get the sense of that he's exasperated with him. There's none of that.
I wonder sometimes if Christians, when we're doing this in a small group Bible study or we're preaching about it in church, we talk a good much.
Yeah.
As they say.
Yeah.
Football. That, we're full of how the team should be.
Full of faith. We know what God said, standing on his promises.
Until we actually get into the fight, and then it all changes. And we should just maybe acknowledge the fact that being right in the forefront of things is a very frightening thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And we should be very reluctant to criticize people like Gideon who are in the crucible, and we're just watching from outside.
I once heard a Christian leader that I very much respect said to me, even when I'm sure God's spoken to me, I'm only 80% sure. And that's enough for me.
Yeah.
And I can be confident. But when are we ever 100% sure? And that's not a question necessarily of, your faith is problematic. It's the very reality of being a human and knowing that we are fallible, that we don't always hear. And Scripture even says we hear in part, we see in part. We don't always know the full picture of what's going on and what God's doing.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to trust and lean on God, even with that 80%. But it's okay to come to him and go, I just need you to show me one more time. I just need you to show me one more time.
We need leaders, and God can use leaders who function like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a sort of, I know people who are 100% certain, so I've got to be like them. No, you don't.
Yeah.
And actually, no, they aren't.
Yeah, they can't be.
Yeah.
Surely not. But then what happens is that all these people have gathered. He's blown this trumpet. People have gathered in their thousands. Mm-hmm. And God sort of says, look, you can't go into battle with all these people because then you're all going to boast that it was in your own strength that this happened, that you defeated the Midianites and you've overcome your oppressors in your own strength. We can't have that. So look, tell them that if any of them are fearful and trembling, they can go home.
Right.
They can go home.
Yeah.
And I do think that some of us, get this message is some of us are not meant to fight all of the fights.
Yes. It's an interesting thing, that, isn't it? Because again, in Christian spirituality, we're always meant to be up for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some people who are never up for it. And there are some people who are up for it, and then they have a season of being not up for it. Paul had his Philippians, Absolutely.
High as a kite, ready to go for it. Yeah.
And Paul had his 2 Corinthians, where I feel despair.
Yeah.
And that's the way we are.
Yeah.
That's the way we are.
Yeah.
And sometimes going home isn't a bad thing to do.
Yeah, and there's seasons for rest and for healing and for input and for stopping and pausing, and that's very much, I think, encouraged in this moment. And nobody's criticised for taking that and going home.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it. It's Gideon's like, no, please don't be here anymore. and then after that, even more is stripped back, because you have this sort of cup, the cupping of the water or the drinking from. There's that picture, isn't there, in this passage, and so more people, there was 10,000, and then there's only 2,000, and now there's only 300 left.
300. Sounds a little bit like Greek history, doesn't it? 300 Spartans.
Yeah.
300 Israelites.
Yeah, exactly. And you have this. So you have these 300 men are left, and then the Lord says to Gideon, "Get up, go down to camp, because I'm going to give the Midianites into your hands." But in verse 10, he says, "If you're afraid to attack, go down to camp with your servant and listen to what they're saying." And then the next verse, so he and his servant went down. Right. And you just have this constant reminder that Gideon is doing it, but he's doing it afraid.
Yeah.
And some of us maybe believe that the fear has to go before we get up and we do the thing that God said.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes the encouragement is to do it afraid. I was preaching on Sunday at our church about the armor of God. And at the end, there's this thing that Paul says about prayer. Pray on all occasions. Pray with all kinds of prayer and petition. Mm. And just thinking about this thing around Gideon, it's like, pray afraid. Mm. Come to God with all of your fears. Come to him with all the ugly. Pray those ugly prayers. Pray those fearful prayers. Pray those anxious prayers. And Gideon is still afraid, and he takes his servant down, and he overhears the Midianite soldiers talking. He sees their massive army, but he hears them talking, and one of them has had a dream that they get defeated. Mm-hmm. And it's such an encouragement to Gideon. He's like, okay, even they are afraid of our God. There's this vast army, camels as far as you can see. There's this sort of idea of, extravagant army. Yeah. And you have these 300 men, but the Midianites are afraid. The very thing that's crippling Gideon seems to be the Achilles heel of the Midianites too.
Yeah. Do it afraid. That makes me think of a friend of mine called Ian. We've known each other for years, and he ran, and still runs actually, a community centre in Crossmaglen on the border between Eire, Southern Ireland, and Northern Ireland. And right the way through the Troubles, Ian and his little team, then he got married to his wife, they ran this place. And he was in a very vulnerable situation. His dad was a local farmer. He's a Protestant. Dad was a local farmer. And the IRA were bumping these people off. Mm. So the farm went on the market and got bought by Catholics. So he was always potentially a target through this town. He came to stay with us for a week once. And I just said to him, how do you keep going, Ian? How do you face the fear? And he just said, I tell my brain not to be afraid. I don't know how that worked, but he was certainly an example of a guy who certainly, big chunks of his life, he lived with fear. Mm. And the triumph was not in never being afraid, but in managing that fear. Mm. And I think a lot of people live with fear.
Of course, and there are the very real fears, right around the world right now. People who are living as Gideon and his resistance were, that sort of fight or flight. There's very real conflicts around the world. There's very real situations, even in people's lives, that just leave them in this sort of heightened sense of fear, anxiety, living with trauma around them all the time. Those are very real situations. And then there's the very real anxieties in our life that do seem to make us more timid. Maybe if it's marriage challenges, relationship challenges, family challenges, debts, all of these things can cause us those anxieties.
A messed up, broken world.
Absolutely.
is a fearful place to be.
Absolutely.
Quite often. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what happens next?
Well, Gideon divides the 300 men into 3 companies, gives them trumpets and empty jars.
More trumpets.
And he's had such success with the first trumpet. I think he thought, yeah, we'll give that a go. And they blow these trumpets. And what happens is the fear, like we said before, the fear that seemed to have grasped Gideon before seems to cause chaos in the Midianite camp.
The army fled as far as Beth Shittah towards Zerah, and off they went. So they're dealt with in half a verse.
Yeah, isn't that remarkable? We have this whole build-up of Gideon being terrified and needing to be coaxed by the Lord into doing what he's been called to do.
And ironically, the thing that finishes off the Midianite challenge is the thing that Gideon had to overcome.
Yeah,
fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you would think then that Gideon goes on to be brilliant and lead the people and all those things, but he doesn't. And he quite rightly at this point doesn't take on leadership. He doesn't become sort of the king or the ruler over Israel. But he does sort of fall into some idolatry a little bit later on in his life. But there is this sense, I think, and what we want to kind of pull out of this story of Gideon is that we can come to God in our fear. We can ask him to show himself. We can ask those encouragements and those reassurances because we need to know his presence. And there's no criticism of Gideon from God in these passages.
I think a lot of Christians live with a guilt that they are fearful. I'm not talking about diagnosable anxiety. I'm talking about
just general fears,
a broken, scary world. And the fear, therefore, makes them non-spiritual, unspiritual. And I know these people then, no fears at all. And the fact is, usually those people are quite frightened inside. And it's what we do with fear that matters, not banishing fear. We can't control our emotions. It doesn't happen. But what we can do is live with them, manage things, and through this, trusting God, doing what he says, even though we're frightened.
Yeah. And in his generosity, God is so capable to reassure us and to walk with us side by side, hand in hand, as he does with Gideon. All those times of reassurance, the fleece, the stories of the Midianites that he overhears, just such a gentle reminder that God's got us. And what a great story.
It's a brilliant story. So next time you preach or teach or do a group Bible study on Gideon, remember this aspect. Because what seems to me, Rachel, you've been doing, you ask the academic questions, what's this story about? Where's it in God's big story? But you've also asked a question we don't often ask, which is, what are the people in this story feeling? And that can be a really, really useful question. So thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Great.
Keeping It Together is a group of Christian professionals working to bring you the good stuff on mental health and Christian well-being. You can find out more on our socials. We are funded by Henry Smith Foundation and we provide podcasts, live sessions and free retreat days for Christian leaders. If you want more information and you can be on our mailing list, just send us a message or email david@daveburketraining.com.